Welcome to the 5 Codes podcast, where we discuss evidence-based methods to elevate yourself to the next level through optimizing the way you look, move, perform, feel, and connect. On today's episode of the 5 Codes podcast, we sit down with Chris Duffin, the mad scientist of strength. He's a multiple-time world record holder in powerlifting and has founded, led, and sold multiple businesses related to powerlifting and his unique interest in biomechanics. He's an engineer by trade. Chris also has a very unique childhood and background. I think it's wildly beneficial for anybody to understand, especially if you're a parent, some of the definitions that he gives. I hope that you get the subtle nuances and pearls out of that I did. The very end, I also asked Chris a question that is very off the cuff, very unexpected for him and for me, honestly. And he gave me a very beautiful answer of his 6 Ps. I hope you get as much out of it as I did. Thank you for being here. The mad scientist of strength, right? That's your, I think, very affectionate nickname, which is really awesome and kind of the most cool nickname I've ever heard for anybody. Why are you the mad scientist of strength in your definition?
From one individual. He was a IFBB pro and then world record holding strength athlete. He's kind of known in the fitness realm, Stan Efferding.
Okay.
He had some back problems and some shoulder problems. When I first shifted into strength as a business, so I've been involved in the strength training realm for quite some time. I created this new product that was for shoulder health. And Stan called me up and he's like, hey, I need some help. So I flew down to Vegas where he was at. And he's this big figure that's in media all the time, in front of the camera all the time. And we get out of the car at the gym and he walks up and he's got a camera guy and he's already rolling. And he's like, and I'm here with Chris Duffin, the mad scientist of strength. And he just launches into this whole spiel. And it was that he
very natural.
It was just, and everybody just stuck with that name and because it made sense.
It's a good one. I love that. Well, so you just kind of hit on a few big questions I think I have for you. You know, trying to pull peak performance out of your life, like ways that you've achieved that, going from, and I'm just highlighting a few things here, going from an engineer, I'm gonna tease people here, engineer to a world record holder, to parlaying those things into design, business, starting and selling companies. What does that evolution look like for you? We're going to pull a lot of training things out of this too along the way, but I'm just curious from like that 30,000 foot view, what was your story and evolution through those things?
I grew up in a way that really forced me to have to deal with my environment and overcome obstacles. I mean, I can't over articulate just how much that was part of my life. So maybe a 90-second elevator pitch on that, right? But I grew up homeless in the wilderness in the Northern California area, dealing with all sorts of crazy things. So, 6 years old, I was being taught how to handle, live rattlesnakes because there was a den close to where we were at. And where we were at was just in, like I said, the wilderness. And our beds were, in beams lashed up into the trees. And there were snakes running around. And I was with my brother and I had to look out for him because he was only 3. And so just being able to have to manage your environment and deal with things. And I learned to manage fear really early on.
Okay.
Being able to understand like that you've got to respect it, but at the same time, you can't let it overcome you. That had a big influence on me. So I felt I could overcome or figure out most anything. Failure didn't really slow me down. It made me who I am, without a doubt. And I wouldn't take it away for anything. But when you become a parent and you start looking through the lens of being a parent and at my kids when they got to be that age, that's when I started writing my book. Because I was like, that's when it really struck home. And I couldn't ever imagine putting my kids through that type of environment and the negativity. Because we get stronger. We can get stronger from anything that comes at us. Like that's adaptation.
Right.
But there's a certain point of like, you get kicked down too far and that's called trauma. And it's, you can get stronger and come out of that. But did you need to go that far and have that much pain and hurt to no, you don't.
Right.
And that's a lot of what I teach. And that's what I try to do is go, how can we minimize that effect? We need to have the challenge. We need to be able to step into this new scary thing, but it doesn't mean falling off a cliff to do it. It doesn't mean having to experience every single type of trauma, which I did. Prior to athletics and strength training, I was incredibly shy. When I went down that route, it developed a lot of self-confidence and really transformed who I was. I wanted to be the best.
Yes. Okay. It's a value of yours, right?
It is.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Fair enough.
I'm very competitive.
Yeah.
And I could dress it up as something bigger than it is, but in reflection, it's growing up as somebody that was looked down on or thought themselves worthless.
Yeah.
And I needed to best everybody.
Yeah,
I needed to best everybody.
An objective way to refute that.
I needed to best them at business. I needed to best them in academics. I needed to best them in athletics. So it came from a very insecure place.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I can realize approaching 50 now that all right, that's why I had to do those things.
I think a lot of people will resonate with that too, because a lot of people watching this are very high performers in their field. They are very competitive, which serves you well at some points in life, school, sports, but then it's in our world of professional life. How do you use that still, and where did it come from in the first place? And it takes a lot of sitting with yourself to get to where you're at, basically. And a lot of people may never do it. But I believe there's value in that and understanding, why it happens. And as a parent, that's where I feel it the most now is how do I pick the good things out of that to pass on? And because I would resonate with what you're saying very strongly too. How do I pick the good things out and understand what may be maladaptive for them? Yeah.
So in the early 2000s, I started getting into how do I create the best environment for myself to be the best strength athlete in the world. That was my goal. And I didn't tell anybody because it was so far out there.
Okay. Environment how?
I needed to have the right tools.
Uh-huh.
I needed to have the right methods.
Okay.
And I needed to have the right environment or people around me.
All right.
So I built it.
Okay.
I went out to my garage and welded up a bunch of equipment and I started a gym. And I brought in like-minded people that had the same thing. And I started researching supplements and everything else. And as I was doing that, I saw so many gaps now in the training world. And so this is early 2000s. And I'm like, this is just crazy what is out there and what people are thinking is how they're supposed to train. And so I started just filming in my gym, like with my old potato phone back then. Hey, I'd pull everybody together and I'd talk about a concept and I'd throw it up on YouTube.
When you were doing this on YouTube, flashing back one frame shift of time, with your potato phone and being maybe a little bit out there, dynamic, ahead of the curve, maybe to say, was that well received?
Yeah, there was a certain sect of, I had a following by this point in time. Right?
Okay.
Like people believed in what I put out and what I did. But most of the industry laughed at me.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Like everything was wrong. Because let's talk the back. Like the methodology at the time to squat big was to arch big and push your belly out and shoot your hips back and some essentially stuff that's going to destroy your back and hips.
Yeah.
Now, most of those people have all had hip replacements and I've worked with a lot of them on packs and so on since then. But it was a shift when I started talking about foot health and not wearing shoes and the shoes you're wearing being wrong. But at the end of the day, I had a tremendous influence. Like right now, if you walk into a lot of gyms, you'll see people strength training in minimalist shoes or barefoot. Like I had a huge impact. Yeah. And I know that because the people that did start following me, the ones that were following me, were the professionals.
So I hear this idea of even a little bit of friction at the beginning.
Yeah.
And my brain goes two places with that when I hear you, is like, you talked about an insecurity on one end, but you also talked about this incredible ability to manage fear. How do those play into taking, I'm asking this person a little bit too, but ideas that not everybody agrees with, but that are relatively cutting edge, that are going to be very influential and have a big impact? How do you balance all those things? How did you balance all those things?
It's a good question. I think there's a certain bit of naivete in there as well.
Right, yeah.
But I think a lot of those insecurities at that lower level were fairly, I would say, resolved to some level. Like I was instilled with a lot of confidence growing up in the environment that I did.
Yeah.
Because I had to overcome a lot. And I always knew that I could just figure it out if I kept at it.
Yeah.
And I failed and I come around, fail again. And I'm
grit.
totally fine with that. Like,
yeah,
I developed a tremendous amount of grit in the course of that. And when I knew something worked, I would go after it. So yeah, there was friction, but I also walked the walk, and that made a big difference too.
Yeah. Blood flow restriction training. This is something my audience will be familiar with because we talked about this. I like to use it before surgery as a way to leverage some of those benefits you just talked about. Let's call it increasing growth factor signaling without over fatiguing my central nervous system. So that I could go into surgery as though with all the good parts of having just done a hard workout, but not actually having done it from a central nervous system fatigue standpoint. So with that in mind, walk me through how that's working. How's that? What's happening there? Because there's studies on this with older individuals, with people who are training. Is there validity to what I'm doing?
Absolutely. So there's multi-modality. So I ended up working with a number of people that were involved with the BFR research. I'm clinically trained in BFR application. So you can use it to enhance the metabolic side of it. You can use it to enhance the growth factor side of it. You can use it to enhance the recovery. You can use it to stimulate your ability to adapt to the next exercise better. To oversimplify it, puts you into a deeper state of fatigue sooner.
Okay. Yeah.
Without the excessive load on the joints, right? So I would use it actually to enhance what I call tissue quality. So when I was squatting really heavy, I was only able to sustain this intense training performance maybe once a week. So I wasn't training very frequently. I spent years prepping for this and then 9 months of tailoring back all the other load to where I would just squat incredibly heavy once a week. But it's all I could sustain. The rest of the week was designated on recovery. But the day before, I would put some BFR bands on because unfortunately, if I'm not training all week, I don't have a lot of glucose in my muscles. They're flat. You want to do a whole body workout and kind of fill that out. That's going to, one, mechanically improve. It's going to reduce my injury risk. It's going to increase the amount of training that I can do. But if I do that, it's going to fatigue me. So I would put some BFR bands on, and I would do about a tenth of my max for 4 sets of 20. And then I'd rest for 2 to 3 minutes, do the same thing again. Yeah. And I would do that the day before, and that would just fill me out. It'd send the signals.
Glycogen synthase goes up, and boom, pumping it in. Yeah.
Exactly. There was a lot of different. I love BFR. There's a lot of different applications for it. One of the best is just being able to do a strength training program and have a strong metabolic effect from it. So thinking about high performers, you don't have 2 to 3 hours to spend in the gym.
Yeah.
Like I could put on BFR cuffs, just make it super simple, right, and do a giant set. Put 4 exercises together and just do one to the next, repeat that whole thing 3 times. Boom. That's 15 minutes. I had the BFR bands on, loosen them up, retighten them. 2 minutes later, do the whole thing again. I've got a 25-minute workout and I just feel amazing. And I've had metabolic workout and a strength training workout sending both signals.
Yeah.
Hugely time efficient. Haven't taken the that joint load on the body. So just there's a practical takeaway.
Yeah, super
easy to do.
And this is what I feel pre-surgically when I do it too. I feel that great feeling of a workout without the normal like, okay, I'm gassed now, quite the same way. Yeah. So I think that's really actionable for your boardroom athletes,
the boardroom
or
athlete,
elite surgeons.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a mechanism to get BFR and play with it. How often would you have your clients that you're sort of coaching use it?
A lot of the research focuses on like 2-week blocks of doing like all BFR and then not doing BFR for 2 weeks. But I find 2 or 3 times a week, you can run fairly long term. I've done that for 6 months, a year with no negative effects, and it's continued to work. So, so there's a lot of flexibility, I think.
I love that.
Just we could get really deep in the weeds with it, trying to give some really easy protocols.
That's good. I love that. Foot biomechanics, a special interest of yours. I'm talking about being barefoot through a company that you have as well. Talk me through again, I'm a boardroom athlete, I'm an elite surgeon, whatever it is. Tell me about being barefoot shoes. Do they really work? What should we look for? How do you navigate that space?
Oh, yes. Thank you. I love this. So number one priority is like the breathing and bracing and spinal mechanics. Number two is the foot and ankle complex. The foot is part of your body. It acts like every other part of your body. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Okay. Makes
It's
sense.
that simple.
Yeah.
So if
What does using your foot mean?
If I wake up every morning and I put a wrap on my elbow because it hurts,
An orthotic.
and
Yeah.
I might need to do that because it's sore. But if I do that over and over, like nonstop, this arm's going to get weak. It's basic concept, specific adaptation to impose demand. The number one concept in training to understand. Yet people would argue with me saying, the foot's special. It's different than the rest of the body. Got to have shoes, got to have orthotics. Like, this is the way to go. And if we're building passive support in there and the foot isn't doing the work itself, it's getting weak, just like that strap on my elbow, that support. Mm-hmm. Shoe design as a whole is a massive issue with this. So when the running shoe craze took off back in the 60s with the book Born to Run, they had to figure out what to do with the shoes because people were wearing dress shoes, which had an elevated heel. And if people start running with a shortened gastroc, they're going to tear. And so they consulted Nike, an orthopedist, and the recommendation was to put a heel in there. The running shoe is build upon build upon build of Band-Aids. And it's destroying how your body is supposed to operate. I could take my shoes off and you'll see I've got jacked feet. There's a lot of muscles in that, right? Because I built that. When I did my 1,000-pound squat and my 1,000-pound deadlift, I did it without shoes.
This was my question.
At the time, people were like, oh my God, he did it and he did it without shoes.
Did you ever wear lifting shoes?
I did earlier in my career.
Yeah.
Shoes have a reason. Sorry, don't like disease, protection from the environments. We live in very hostile places that have hot pavement and asphalt, and you got bathrooms, and you got I'm not suggesting that at all, right? But maybe we want to spend some time touching the ground, moving on uneven surfaces, and using your foot. Okay, just spend some time using it. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
Now, when you first start doing it, it's gonna hurt.
Most common feedback I hear from people when I encourage them, as I'm sitting here barefoot, we talked about this earlier, I made the switch years ago to be exclusively in minimalist barefoot types of shoes. But that's the most common thing I hear from people is my feet hurt, my tibialis anterior, my shin hurts, it's uncomfortable to walk and stand in.
Start with 20% of your time in a minimalist shoe. Mm-hmm. Do that for a few weeks. Feels good? Do longer. If it's too much, do less. What would happen if I walked into the gym with never training before and go, you know what, I'm going to do 225 for sets 20 today?
Yeah, right.
You're going to break and you're going to hurt yourself.
Yep.
Are squats bad?
Yeah, right.
Basic common sense. Mm-hmm. Basic common sense. Just treat the foot like every other part of your body.
I wonder this, because I have these analogous things in my world where when you said orthotics, it piqued me a little bit to be like, well, how did
meta-analysis on, we could talk about, go
well,
finish your question.
My question becomes, these things exist in my world too, where it's clearly become, that's probably not best, but it was ubiquitous. They were sold, or it is sold everywhere. And some people just refuse to change their mind, even though we know it's not the best option anymore. Science may argue otherwise, hasn't maybe caught all the way up yet. Is that how orthotics were? Was it based off a business model? Is that how it got so prevalent? Where did things go wrong? And then did people just immediately adapt and change, or did people hold out? Are there still holdouts? What does that look like?
Go into podiatry school and see what's being taught.
Okay.
And see who's teaching it. Orthotics manufacturers.
Okay. So there's industry driving this.
There's industry driving it.
All right.
And it's in the education system. Go look at the meta-analysis on the value of orthotics, right? Guess what? They work. They provide relief for, a 6-8 week period of time, and then they do nothing beyond that.
Maybe hurt. Not maybe, definitely hurt.
Definitely hurt because specific adaptation to impose demand is not happening. It's getting weaker. Mm-hmm. It's that simple.
Yeah.
I don't have to argue the point. Mm-hmm. I break my arm, I put a cast on, the process of atrophy happens. If it's not adding any value beyond that point and it's reducing and restricting and not allowing it to work, it's doing damage. Now there's lots of research around this stuff.
Yeah, because I'm arguing this with things in my industry that have very short data looking to a certain point. It meets its clinical endpoints for this thing. People believe a certain thing about it. It's driven by industry. The industry's teaching the providers. The providers are passing it on. This is filler. I'm talking about filler in my world. And people refuse to sort of look past the initial towards the long term, which it sounds like is orthotics. So look at 6-8 weeks. It's incredibly better. Did they just ignore the long-term
But the
data?
meta-analysis shows no additional benefit beyond that point.
And then people just choose to ignore it, or it took a while, or what happened?
Well, there's no argument because there's no studies.
Yeah. I resonate with this. Yeah.
I shouldn't have to, but you have to understand some of the people that look at research, it's like everything has to be a study. Mm-hmm. And if that wasn't studied, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't need to be, because do you understand the concept that like this is how the body works,
and this is what's happening.
This is how it works.
Yeah,
like,
right. Yep. That resonates. That hits with me big time. So
that's how I approached that, was trying to use analogies of like, yeah, this is no different than your arm. Like, it's no different than anything else. Tell me how that is.
Yeah.
And yeah, you'll have people that just disagree with you.
Yeah, for sure. You talked about owning your own gym, training barefoot. I train barefoot often. My feet take a beating sometimes, especially on certain surfaces, like the rubber mats of a CrossFit gym. I agree with my feet, which could be irritant, allergic, who knows, whatever it may be. But if people can train barefoot, should they? I love that in sand and grass in particular, for the grounding effects too. But then what about in gym settings? Like, what is somebody's best option? What makes a good barefoot shoe? What should they look for?
Yeah, absolutely. Love that question.
Yeah.
You want something that moves freely. You want to be able to pull the insole out, put your foot on the top of it, and make sure that your toes are not splaying over the top, past the sides.
Wider than the insole.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So we need to have a toe box that has that. You don't want cushion in there. Now, that said, we want a great connection to the ground. So you want something that's got a low durometer. So you stick it to the ground, you twist it, and it wants to stick. Right. So one, foot fits, twists. It's got to be something that you can aesthetically wear.
Yeah. Yep.
Let's be honest. I mean,
right. You got to put it on for it to be functional.
It's got to be okay with you.
Okay.
What
about training barefoot?
Think of a shoe as a tool. You want the most minimal amount of support and still get the job done that you can. So if you can go barefoot, that's fantastic. If you can't, get the least restrictive thing that's closest to that. Try not to overcomplicate it.
Okay. Love that. Love that. Okay. One topic that I want to pick your brain on, last one, I think, big one here, which we kind of talked about before, was performance enhancements, performance enhancing, whether those are anabolics, whether those get into peptides, whatever those may be, which is all a spectrum of things, right?
Yep.
Growth hormone versus growth hormone analogs, secretologs, ghrelin mimickers. You said something to me that like really resonated earlier when you set 2 world records.
Yep.
Right? This is squatting 1,001 pounds for, correct me if I'm wrong, 1,001 pounds for 3 reps, deadlifting 1,002 pounds for 3 reps, both of those things together, which is remarkable because usually people have one or the other, right?
Yep.
And you were showing that your like mad scientist was effective, basically, right? But you said I could never do that without performance enhancements with anabolics at that point.
Yep.
And that just immediately piqued me to like, interesting. Where does that mindset come from? And I think I'm asking, would you do that again? How did you frame that up in your brain? Yeah. What has that meant for you long term now that you're a dad? And like, how do you work with all those things?
Yeah. So I started my anabolic journey very late. When I was 33, I had very low testosterone at that point, but I wanted to set all the records in the tested categories, which I did. And I was an 800-pound deadlifter at 198-pound body weight.
Before any performance enhancements?
Before any performance enhancements.
Okay.
And my doctor had been pushing me to go on TRT. And I said, I'm going to wait till I'm 33, which is when you go into the submaster class in strength sports. So you're no longer in the open class, you're in the submaster. I'm like, I'll go submaster, use TRT. I'm like, well, if I'm going to use TRT, I may as well use TRT plus because I'm competing against, and I already was like competing against people that were using anabolics. Like that was my competition anyway.
At baseline before.
At baseline, because that was the level I was at.
Okay.
Then I started peptides at 33. And I used those up into my early 40s. I stopped in 2020, which would have been 43.
This is the anabolics you're talking
Yeah, so
about.
10 years I used anabolics. Then it came down to dealing with the issues that related to that. I used excessive androgens for a long time. I was essentially pre-diabetic over that period of time. Yeah, some of my blood markers did start drifting where they shouldn't be. I didn't feel great. I was bloated. I didn't want to walk up flights of stairs. I was 280 pounds. And yeah, it was unwinding that. It was the process that I've been on the last 5 years, which is interesting because that's now kind of what I help a lot of people do is enhance performance in the health realm. Majority of what I work with is, I call them boardroom athletes, but high performers. And then I've got a small subset of people that work in certain industries that are very aesthetic-based, public-facing, action movie stars, things of that nature, where they've used anabolics for their career, right? And I'm working on get a lot of those people off, same thing. So I've been used what I've learned in that. And so a lot of my protocols are enhancing performance, because with the boardroom athlete, I talk this, not just unwinding health, it's maximizing mental clarity, energy, how that then rolls into your emotional stability, right? Like all this, those are all feed quite a bit. Like when you're drained like that, you lose your emotional resilience. You're like the
True.
It hits you. You got a challenging business deal or something to walk. You need to be at your best
for sure.
Like that's why I call it the boardroom athlete, because it really is. If you work I have that experience of working that life, I know what it's like, and it's a lot of stress.
In your combination of the boardroom athlete who's stressed and revved up and sympathetic tone autonomically, and your action movie star who you are unwinding, as you're saying, off of their anabolics. Is it a discussion? Do you notice these premature aging changes in their faces? Are these discussion points?
I wouldn't say that it's a cornerstone of any conversation.
Sure.
But that early aging process, is going to be combined with a lot of other health markers.
Sure.
Go on my social media channel and scroll through some of the comments over the last few years, and you'll see constantly people like, Chris, what are you doing to age backwards? And I put a lot of stress on my body. And it's crazy because I've documented the last 20 years online, and you could see so much change in me over this period of time, and people see that and comment. It's that visible.
Interesting. Well, it's very thorough, very deep there. Thank you for that deep dive into it. And those are very personally fascinating to me too. And I feel like we've been through a very thorough, from biomechanics to business through, honestly, I really loved the beginning when we were talking about, self-confidence and fear tolerance and managing that. Is there any other key takeaways that you would just if you could just give one piece of advice to someone seeking peak performance with your unique knowledge? What's your one pearl that you feel like you're the best thing to deliver? Do you have that?
We talked about the body. We didn't talk about the mind.
Yeah.
The 6 P's is the way I frame this. Think about a square root. Your life is mapped over this. It's the action book story of life. It's the story arc of every movie or book that you read. All right. The precipice, the plunge, you've got the pit, you got the pull, then you have the peak where you're going. You've got the plateau. You can't forget about taking the time for reflection, the self-care. You can't keep burning the candle all the time. So the precipice, the important thing with the precipice is recognizing when you're there. That is the key. Being able to learn the signals, that mixture of fear and excitement that are brewing in that gut, the things that tell you to take that step and the things that tell you not to. That's your moment. It tells you that there's an opportunity for you to learn and go stronger and to take that step.
And you're about to plunge.
Then you're about to plunge. The plunge is about introspection. It's about turning inward and taking and meditating into the fears, meditating into the shame, that whatever it is that's the depression, whatever it is, when you're in that uncertainty of, oh my God, what have I done? Where am I going? What's going to come out of, you're in a free fall. You haven't hit bottom yet, right? Turn into those emotions at that. Then you're at the pit. You want to shorten the time. You want to create the least amount of depth there.
It is very narrow in your analogy. It's very narrow.
And it can be. It can be really long.
Yeah.
First step when you're in that pit, acknowledge. Take a moment, go, oh, I'm in one of these moments in life. I'm in the pit. It's not going to be like this forever. This is just a point in life. This is not life. Mm-hmm. It can be incredibly powerful. Taking that step back, that third person look and go, I acknowledge. Then step 2 is celebrate. This is what life's made of. And you need to celebrate the fact that I'm going to get on the other side of this and I'm going to be so fucking proud of what I've done and what I've worked through to be there. Celebrate. And the last one is now leverage that. As you're going out of that, build those skills, because what we're going to be through more of these. And the peak, like I said, that's your vision. That's the gain. It needs to be bigger than the pain. This is how you lead organizations. This is how you lead people. And if you lead people through this cycle and they come out the other side and they accomplish more than what they thought they could accomplish themselves, you're going to transform them.
It's really cool.
That's part of my educational philosophy on that I walk my clients through.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
On resilience. I also teach a course on that at UC Berkeley. So.
You do? Yeah. That's very pertinent information. As you're saying this, I'm like, it's like hitting so hard. I'm like, oh, I could think of a million times in my life I'm going through things like that, and definitely immediately too right now. So it's really helpful. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for spending time and walking through all of those. It's a lot to digest there. So it's cool. We can go as deep as we want in this, and there's no bottom to it. So I appreciate you very much. If you have any questions or topics you would like me to explore further, please leave them in the comments. I read them all, and they often help shape the future conversations here. If you would like to learn more about my surgical practice, you can visit clinic5c.com, where you will find additional information on my approach to surgery, recovery, and performance-focused care. I also want to be clear that the views shared on this podcast are my own and are not associated with or representative of my clinical teaching affiliation with the University of Washington School of Medicine, nor should this be taken as individual medical advice. Thank you for spending your time with me. I appreciate you being here, and I will see you on the next episode.